Earlier in this chapter, I showed you how to make graphics for different rollover states in Photoshop by applying pre-built styles from Photoshop's Styles panel. But that's not the only way to vary the Photoshop artwork between rollover states. Alternatively, you can put different pieces of artwork on different layers and then manipulate the visibility of layers as you change rollover states. I'll show you how that's done in Photoshop in just a moment, but first I want to show you the results here in my Safari web browser. All the artwork that you're about to see was created in Photoshop, and then I took it from Photoshop into Dreamweaver to program the artwork to roll over like this. If I take my mouse and I move over any one of these icons, the icon gets bigger and turns purple. And the same is true of this gear icon, and this wetsuits icon, the swimwear, and the surfboard. The way that I did that was to create two graphics and put one on each layer. One a small black version of each icon, and the other a larger purple version of each icon. And then I varied the visibility of those two layers in the over state and in the normal state of each button. But that's not all. I also added another state, and that is a state that's triggered here in the web browser by a viewer moving his or her mouse over an icon and clicking or pressing down. So for example, I'm going to move over the wetsuit, it turns purple and gets bigger, and now I'm going to press down on my mouse and the color changes to blue. I'll go over to another icon and do the same thing. On mouse over, the icon gets bigger and turns purple. On mouse down, it turns blue. And you can see that's true on all these icons. And I did that by adding a color overlay layer effect on the large version of each icon. So I'm going to go back into Photoshop and show you how that's made. Here in Photoshop, you can see a navigation bar that contains all of the artwork that I brought into Dreamweaver to program as rollovers. The artwork was all created here on layers. In the Layers panel, you can see that there are multiple layer groups. The black small icons that you see here are in the layer group called Small. If I click the arrow to the left of that layer group, you'll see that it contains these 5 layers, each of which contains a separate small black icon. So I'll turn a couple of these off and on so that you can see the content of each layer. By the way, if you're wondering about the icons on these layers, these are smart objects that were made in Adobe Illustrator and then brought into Photoshop. So this is the way that I've planned the navigation bar to look on the normal state. To memorialize that in a layer comp, I'm going to go up to the Layer Comps panel, and I'm going to click the New Layer Comp button down here at the bottom of that panel. In the New Layer Comp dialog box, I'm going to name this layer comp Normal. And I'll leave all 3 of the layer comp properties checked, although the one I'm really interested in is visibility because that's the property that I'm varying across rollover states. I'll click OK, and now I have one layer comp which I've labeled Normal. Next, I'm going to set up the appearance of the overstate of these buttons. On the overstate of any one button, I would like the button to get larger and become purple. So I'm going to go down to my Layers panel, and I'm going to click the eye icon to the left of the small layer group to make all the layers in that group temporarily invisible. And I'll collapse that layer group just to make some room, and then I'm going to go to the big layer group, and I'm going to click the arrow to the left of that group. You can see that in this group there are 5 other layers. Each of these layers contains a larger version of the icons, which I've colored purple. I'm going to click the eye icon to the left of the big layer group, and that turns on all of the layers in that group. So this is the way that I would like each button to look on its individual overstate. Now remember, not all of these icons will be triggered at the same time. They'll just appear one at a time when a viewer moves his or her mouse over the corresponding icon in a web browser. To capture this look, I'm going to go to the Layer Comps panel, click the Add Layer Comp button again, and I'll call this the overstate, and I'll leave all the properties checked again and click OK. Now if I cycle back to the normal layer comp in the Layer Comps panel, you can see the small black icons, and when I click on the Over Layer Comp, you see the large purple icons. But that's not all. I'd like to make one more state, and that is going to be called the down state. Here in Photoshop, I'll set up the appearance of the buttons as I'd like them to look on the down state. What I'd like to have happen is for each button to change color and turn blue. One way to do that is by adding a layer effect. So I'm going to start with this Wahini layer, which is this icon right here. I'll go to the FX button at the bottom of the Layers panel, and I'm going to choose Color Overlay. That opens the Layer Style dialog box, where I have a black or dark color overlay going on. I'd like that to be a blue color, so in the Color Overlay options, I'm going to click the color field, and I'm going to choose a blue color. I'll click OK, and then I'll click OK one more time to close the Layer Style dialog box. Now I'd like to use that same color overlay layer effect on these other 4 layers. One way I can do that is simply copy the layer effect from one layer to another. I'm going to hold down the Option key on a Mac, that's the Alt key on a PC, as I click on this color overlay effect on the Wahine layer and drag up to the gear layer and release my mouse. And that copies the effect to the gear layer, and you can see that the gear icon is now blue. I'll do the same thing again. I'm going to Option or Alt click on the color overlay effect on the Wahine layer and drag it up to the wetsuit layer. And I'll keep doing that for each layer. Option Alt click and drag, and Option Alt click and drag. And now I've managed to color each one of the large icons with this lovely blue. Now I'll have Photoshop remember that in yet another layer comp by going up to the Layer Comps panel, clicking the Add New Layer Comp icon here, and calling this state the down state and clicking OK. Now I can cycle through my 3 layer comps by using these arrows at the bottom of the Layer Comps panel. And there you can see the normal state with the small black icons, the overstate with the large purple icons, and the down state with the large blue icons. So those are a couple more ways that you can create rollover artwork in Photoshop by varying the visibility of layers and by applying individual layer effects. At this point, I would go through all the steps that I showed you in previous movies when I was describing how to create rollover artwork with built-in styles. I would slice up these buttons, I would name the slices, I would optimize everything for the web, and then I would run the lynda.com layer comps to slices script that we've provided for you to export out all of the rollover graphics for all of the states of all of these buttons all at once.